Hair in My Tea. That's a new hit single from Alex Ellison. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of Unsubscribe, the demandDrive podcast. Today, I've got 5 questions for one of demandDrive's own, Greg Cammarata. We got a little bonus episode today with Greg. First of all, Greg, how are you?
I'm doing well, AJ. Thank you. Thank you for asking. How you doing?
No one ever asked me how I'm doing. I'm doing well. Thank you, Greg. I appreciate that. It means a lot to me.
Love to hear
it. Great example of building rapport with someone. Wow, right off the bat, you're kind of already jumping into the topic at hand, which is effective research tactics for prospecting and how you, as an account executive, go about that process. Obviously, understanding enough about someone to build rapport is part of that. But I wanted to just kind of deep dive a little bit into your process around research, how you go about pulling in new accounts and all that jazz. Teach everyone out there how a real pro does it. How scale of 1 to 10, how excited are you to talk about this today? And don't lie.
11.
I'll know if you're lying.
11.5.
Love it. All right, so let's just kick it off here. We're starting off silly. Greg, scenario. All right, you're sitting down. It's Monday morning. You've got a fresh calendar ahead of you. No booked meetings. You're ready to just hit the ground running. Start prospecting. Let's talk about pulling in new accounts and contacts to bring into your cadence. What does your process look like for that in terms of pulling in new accounts? How many are you pulling in each week? What does your consistency status look like? Give us an idea of what that looks like for you.
Yeah. So the first thing, what I'm going to do based off that day is tied to my weekly goal. And I think it's important to set like an amount of accounts that you want to research and prospect into per week. So like all net new stuff. So, and I think it does depend on like maybe the types, if you're doing a very highly personalized campaign or if you do a highly personalized, strategy for X amount of time, then that number might be a little bit lower. Or if you're doing more of a high volume play, obviously that numbers can be a little bit higher. But for myself, I'd say in between, 20 to 50 accounts per week based on the type of campaign I'm doing. If it's more personalized, then I'd say about 25. And personalized, using like video and whatnot. But anyway, so when it comes to the actual accounts that I'm going to map out for the day, say my goal is 25, I'm going to break that into 5 accounts per day that I'm going to do some deep research into and prep for a pretty personalized outreach. So I'll pull those 5 accounts using Sales Navigator or whatever tool, obviously Zoom Info as well. Pull those accounts, find all the relevant decision makers within those accounts. So some days I might be hitting up accounts that have a few more. Some days there might be like a less actual contacts tied to them. And that's how I'm going to basically decide who I'm going to be reaching out to.
Got it. So you try to go for the consistency model, not like, hey, let me see if I can beat, last week's record and pull in 30 accounts instead of 25 and just try to keep getting more and more and more and focusing on volume. Like
100%. Yeah. I'm entirely.
Do you find it valuable to just have a process around that number and sticking with it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I talked over you there for a second, but yeah, I think the most important thing is just being consistent with what you do, no matter what strategy it is, like whether you're doing a very highly personalized approach where you might be reaching out to less contacts per week, or if you're doing more of a high volume, like you can't scrap it after week 1 if it doesn't work, or if you don't see all the results you want. You have to build momentum and be consistent with everything you do.
Follow-up question to that. You kind of know at this point, you've been doing the job for a while, how many accounts you want to pull in on a weekly basis based on the campaigns that you're running. Like you said, how long did it take for you to figure that out? I know you said don't scrap it after a week, but did you try it's highly personalized, let me go 5 accounts a day for 4 weeks, just to toss a number out there?
Yeah, it took me some time. I would have to, And just so I have the question right, are you asking like how long it took for the types of how long it took me to decide the amount of accounts I want to reach out to, or specifically like
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
that's a
Like
really good
how
question.
comfortable you are with that number.
Yeah. So when I did, and I'm just going to use like doing a very highly personalized approach because that's what I'm doing now, and I think it's most relevant. So when I started doing that, I was pulling my initial goal was to do 50 research 50 different accounts per week and reach out to them with like a video message and personalized email. Um, and that took a lot of time. And I realized that wasn't super sustainable. And it was actually taking away from the other things I wanted to get done, like actually making dials, follow-up emails. You know, as you mentioned, I'm an AE now, so nurturing pipeline, having discovery calls. And I felt like this crazy amount of like stress trying to like, all right, I have to do 10 per day, 10. And when I say 10, like these are accounts and each account might have like a minimum on a low end, each account is probably going to have like 3 people you're going to reach out to. Realistically, it's more like,
Mhm.
5 plus sometimes. So we can crunch the numbers after, but anyway. So I was
Do
doing
the
that
math in your
50.
head.
Yeah, forever, whoever's listening, just do the math in your head. So I was doing like the 50 accounts per week, or trying to, was taken away from my day to day, and I was actually less productive. So I scaled it down pretty considerably, and I started doing 25 with this personalized approach. And once I started, and I tweaked it, or you know what, I kind of forget because I've been doing this for a little bit. I actually might have scaled it to like, a little bit less, went up a little bit more. And then I found out at 25, I was getting consistent results. I was getting like, I was hitting the lead goal that I had set out for myself for this type of campaign. And I just stuck at 25. And that being said, I don't think that's like a golden number that you have to reach out to every week, but just for the type of campaign that I'm running right now, my goal is 25, break it into 5 accounts per day. It's manageable. I can do all the other things that I have to do when it comes to this role. And maybe down the road, if I try a new campaign, more of a high volume campaign, maybe 50 is a number or 100's a number. But right now, for this highly like this focus that's tied to research, I'm going to focus on doing like about 25 per week.
Nice. Yeah, it's great that you found that number through testing, experimentation, all that.
Yeah.
So you've got accounts. So go back to that scenario we talked about. It's Monday. You're working on pulling in the new accounts that you have for the week, and you've identified who you want to reach out to account wise. What is the step after that? Do you start mapping them out by contact? Do you start doing account level research? Talk us through step 2.
Yeah. So it's a little bit of and this is actually funny. So in the same period when I was trying to figure out how many to reach out to, I was also like figuring out what to research. So if you look at some of my notes when I started like really doing significant research into accounts, like I include so much stuff in there that is like super irrelevant, and it took a lot of time. But that being said, the process was still essentially the same. So I'm going to find out at that point, I'm going to find the contacts within those accounts who I want to get in contact with. I'm going to do Zoom info at that point, or whatever data tool you use at that point to find the contact information, just because while you're there, it's going to save you time. And then I do a little bit of both. So the main thing that I do when it comes to research is that I research the account. I get a base understanding of what that company does, enough so I can have like an intelligent conversation with them. I don't want to like, at this point, I also don't want to overanalyze what they do, because no matter what, I'm not going to know the ins and outs of their business like they will. And I also think it's like going to hurt you to try to over explain like what they know what they do. You don't need to know the in depth of what they do as much as they already know. So I just think it's important to have like a base understanding of it. So I figured that out. And then at this point, what I'm going to do is look up some relevant articles, or try to find some relevant articles or trigger events that would be applicable to this company. So for example, if I'm reaching out for demand on behalf of demandDrive, if a company's looking to hire SDRs, if they recently got and they have job postings put up on their LinkedIn page or wherever for SDRs, if a company recently got a round of funding and they plan to invest in sales and marketing, oftentimes articles like TechCrunch will highlight this, and they'll literally spell out like they plan. Sometimes it's even as specific, like they want to expand their sales development efforts. So that's an awesome thing to leverage. So I'll pull that information, try to find trigger events, and sometimes you can be a little bit more creative. If there aren't any trigger events, I'll try to find another reason to reach out to them. So for example, using the demandDrive example again, if they don't have SDRs, I'm going to look on LinkedIn Sales Navigator, find out if they have any internal SDRs in place. If they don't have any, or if they do, or just kind of be a little bit creative there, I'll reference that as well. So that's the account side that I'll research. Is I'm going to figure out the individual, or excuse me, I'm going to find out what not the individual. I'm going to find out what the company does, find out if there's any trigger events, and then while I'm doing that too, I'm going to do some research on the individual as well that I'm pulling, because at that point I'm already on their LinkedIn page. I'm already doing this. I don't want to do all this research and have to. I've done this for a while, so I just realized what saves me the most time. And this is the part that I think is it takes a little time to learn, because you want to find out something that's relevant. So oftentimes, I'm going to take a look at their LinkedIn profile. I'm going to take a look at some of their recent posts, see if there's anything I can pull that I can reference, like in the first line of the email, or even when I speak with them, that's relevant to the reason why I'm reaching out, and basically explain my reasoning too. So I'm going to look for that, and I'm going to put that in my notes to reference in that email. So that's kind of like my research process that I'm going to do. In the beginning, I used to pull tons of irrelevant things, and it took me a lot longer to actually get my research done. But now after doing this for a while, I've realized I know the account number I have to hit. I know what I'm looking for when I reach out to these people, and I know what they care about talking about. So it took me a little bit longer, but now I have it more to a system, and it's a lot more predictable at this point.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I think it's like you brought up a really good point there, where when you do some of that account level research and you're kind of digging through some news articles and looking for trigger events that are relevant to whatever it is you're reaching out for, by default, you kind of come across the right people to talk to about those things. So you're almost doing both account level research and contact research in one swoop by going through that process and figuring out why am I talking to this company? Does it make sense for me to get in touch with them based on sort of what their current environment looks like and what my value propositions look like? So that's a good way to kind of kill two birds with one stone almost, and really make the most of your time, rather than, like you said, what you were doing before, just finding irrelevant information about this guy went to college at, I don't know, Washington, St. Louis, and they've got Devils as their mascot. And I love New Jersey, and Devils are a good connection. You can go into such a rabbit hole there. It's tough.
Yeah, that's true. That being said, though, one thing that I will do is that I think there's actually a time and place for even referencing silly things, or even their college. I don't think it's a great strategy just to say they on their LinkedIn profile, and they just say essentially just highlights I love fishing. And if I just sent an email and just try to play on the fact that they just mentioned that they like fishing, but I personally don't even care about fishing, that's just, I feel like that's not authentic, and it just kind of it's a weird way to reach out to them. So I think also just being a person, and if say I'm an avid fisher, and they reference fishing on their LinkedIn, maybe my subject line will be one fisherman to another, or something like that, and it can be a little bit relevant. But then I still believe, though, the actual substance of the email or the phone call that you have with them should actually have something that's relevant on a B2B side, so I think it kind of goes both ways. I think I think it's nice to throw in the fun stuff, the college stuff, but just make sure that I don't think that should be the core of your research, just finding random things to reference. I think it's a good little trick to get them to open your email, and in a way, it could even take it even a step further, because if you can throw in those silly or fun things, and then they open the email and they're like, wow, this person really did their research on my company, and this is actually pretty interesting. I want to learn more. I think that's going to help you. But I wouldn't just rely solely on that fun stuff to reference when you're doing research.
That's a great point. I mean, you said it early on in your statement there, just be a human. I think people just kind of forget that that's what you're doing. You're just a person talking to another person. So don't act I don't know, you're just talk to them, right? Just be a normal guy talking to another person. To me, it's not that hard. I know it is kind of tough when you put up the veil of like prospecting in front of it. But it's a good thing to just like level set and be like, oh yeah, I'm just a person. That's just a person. They have an interest. I have an interest. They match up. Maybe they, it makes sense to talk about like you said, bring up the B2B stuff and like actually put in some legit research into it. But like, you're still just a person talking to a person. And to that point as well, like, I think it becomes easier to do that and to know that with comfort. Like the more you do it, the easier it gets. And for me, and I'd love to get your take on it, one of the best ways to achieve that level of comfort is to go beyond just like account or contact research and do industry research as well. So that you're not just knowing what's going on at that account or specifically with that person, but in the industry overall, if that person works in, I don't know, like the HR tech space. If I do research on the HR tech space, I'm going to be a lot more comfortable talking to them about their goals, initiatives, challenges, whatever. And that level of comfort allows me to then get into some of the silly stuff and make it a little bit more easy to do that. Are you a big proponent of industry level research on top of account and contact level stuff?
You know what's funny? When I think about it, a lot of my industry knowledge, because, and I'll use the demandDrive example again, like I'm reaching out to like similar personas, like, whatever industry that we, like there's certain industries that we work with pretty heavily, like healthcare, cybersecurity, big data, like all that jazz. So I actually, just from doing like tons of account research on the account level at these companies, I've learned a lot about the industry just from doing that. So that was actually if I was going to highlight my process, I actually haven't done that. Like I don't have that mapped out in my regular process. That being said, now I do it. Just because I have that base, I just like have learned individually. I learn what different companies do. I kind of learn the terminology just from doing this research, even if it's a quick level. Like, as I mentioned before, I'm not an expert by any means on all these different companies, but after a while, like for example, in cybersecurity, you learn a little bit from just doing tons of outreach and doing this little bit of research. And then now it's nice that I have and anyone would have this. Now you have this bank of information, just like whether it's in your CRM, or if you have like an Excel file that's tied to it or whatever, or just in your brain where you learn about these companies, you get an idea of what they do. And then when you see something that's relevant in the industry, then you can go back to it and reference them in a follow-up. You can reference that type of information in the follow-up. So I've learned a lot of the industry knowledge first from initially reaching out at account level. And now I do like systematically will like scan Google. Like I have, Google alerts, or take a look at like certain articles on TechCrunch to see like what's going on in the macro at this point. But it's funny, in the beginning, I didn't do that as much. I probably should have done it more. But I did get a little bit of an idea of it from just putting like these small pieces together when doing outreach.
Very cool. Yeah. Again, killing 3 birds with 1 stone. Now you're when you're doing that account level research, you're getting contact info and you're learning more about the industry. So it's, a lot of people talk about research being not a waste of time, but it's time consuming. Whereas you could just be picking up the phone and making dials. But when you think about it like that, if you're doing research on account levels and you're pulling in the right people to talk to and you're learning more about the space, like you're doing a whole lot with a little bit of time. I do want to bring up specifically, you mentioned Google Alerts and you mentioned a couple of different tools in there. Where are you finding the best information? Where do you typically go to get contact level info, to get industry info, account intelligence? Just, I know you've mentioned a couple of names so far, so I wanted to specifically ask a question around that to wrap that up.
Yeah, absolutely. So contact info, Zoom info. I'll use Hunter too, which is a Google Chrome app you can use to find emails if for some reason Zoom info doesn't have it. And finding individual contacts, I'm going to be using LinkedIn Sales Navigator. And I'm just trying to think if there's any other tools I use. You're asking specifically for contact. Did you say contact information or contacts too?
Yeah, like contact info, where you're doing account level research as well. Basically any kind of tool or location you go to get the stuff you need to make sure you're.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, just to break it down. So like Sales Navigator to find the contacts themselves, Zoom info and Hunter for contact information. For for actual like research, Google is my biggest tool. Google and LinkedIn, even their LinkedIn profile. Sometimes I feel like any salesperson can relate to this. If you look at LinkedIn and you read their bio, you're like, I still am not sure what this company does. So if that's the case, I recommend just going on Google, taking a look at an article, and like an article written not by the company. Sometimes like the first line will just highlight what they do, and okay, that makes sense. So I'll use both of those when I'm doing my count, learning about the count itself. Crunchbase too. That's a great one, just to give you like an in-depth look at the company itself and some back-end numbers. But yeah, those are the tools itself, and those are the ones I mentioned are the ones I primarily use. And for the information and the substance, Google is my is the biggest thing, just to try to find relevant articles or intel on them.
Love it. Yeah, I was a big Google Alerts guy back in the day. I actually, side note, story that means absolutely nothing to this, but I used to do some training at demandDrive for newer reps. And one of the things that I specifically for account research purposes trained people on was how to use Google Alerts, because it's a great way just to set up some automated notifications of like big things happening in someone's industry. But the sample account that I always used was a Google Alert for puppies, just any news about puppies, period. And I set it up as like a dummy account, but it was attached to my Gmail. So I got a weekly alert for puppy news for like years, just because I never turned it off. It was great. I don't know. I think I eventually turned it off because I was like, I'm getting too many news about like puppy mills, and it was getting kind of sad. But all of the like the cute like puppy videos that went up on YouTube and stuff, it was like every morning I'm like, oh, look at that new puppy stuff. Great.
So yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, I would just keep that going. Yeah, there's no point even take that off.
You know what? I'm going to re-sign up. Doing it right now. No, I'm kidding. All right, let's wrap this up. Think about sort of everything you've said research-wise, the process that you've kind of laid out. How do you ensure that everything you're doing cohesively is repeatable, scalable, and something that you can bank on every week, knowing that like week in and week out, your process is going to work?
I think you don't until you try it, and then you pivot and do what works, honestly. Because in the beginning, what I was doing too much accounts, too many accounts, like too in depth of research, and then I just kind of calibrated after a while. That's the best way I feel like to describe it. Like I don't believe like there's a set system. I just think no matter what, if you do quality outreach and you do it at scale, it's going to work. So you just have to kind of figure out the number that works best for you, that aligns with the goal that you have set out for yourself, and then also any other goals that are tied to what you actually need to achieve. So I would say that's like the best way to phrase it. I don't think there's like necessarily like this is going to absolutely work, but figure out what works for you. Every business is different too. So like the model that I highlighted in this, in this podcast, like there's a chance that maybe for a different type of sale, a company that has a different type of sale, that would not work whatsoever. So just kind of figuring out, like, I think like the research is going to work primarily throughout like whatever vertical you're prospecting into. The number you might have to tweak depending on certain things, but I would just find out like, and I would just say the biggest thing is that once you find that number, make sure it's something that's sustainable, and it's something that isn't like something you can do for a long time and consistently. Because if it's, if you're overdoing it for the first like 3 weeks and you burn out, then it's kind of no point at all. Just making sure you're hitting a number that's you can consistently hit week in, week out for researched accounts.
Love it. Yeah, I'm not going to lie, I didn't expect your answer for how do you ensure it works to just say you can't, but I do like the way that you phrased it, because it's true. Like you can't guarantee anything in sales specifically, but especially around like researching and making sure that you're like pulling in exactly the right number of accounts with exactly the right people with exactly the right message. If that was the case, then our jobs would be a whole lot easier. Some experimentation and sort of understanding that you have to tweak things based on the world around you and what's going on is really good advice for someone who's thinking about incorporating more research into their process. Like nothing's set in stone, just keep figuring it out until it works and then stick with it. Sweet.
Yeah.
Any last bits of wisdom, tidbits, anything you want to leave the audience before we sign off?
Yeah, I mean, nothing really. If I know the focus on this was just research, so I guess the biggest takeaway is just consistency and not necessarily overkill. You might do that in the beginning where you'll feel like I don't even know what I'm looking for, but once you get more comfortable and you start seeing results, you'll cross out certain things that you don't need to look for in research. You'll add things that are more important, and yeah, just make sure you do that. While you do that, just try to keep it consistent and you'll start seeing those results. Because at the end of the day, one thing that does work is like quality outreach, whether it's phone, email, LinkedIn, whatever, at scale, at a reasonable scale will work. So just keep doing that.
Nice. If people want to learn more about you, about demandDrive, see more of your, I don't know, musings on research, where can they find you? Do you have a LinkedIn profile that you regularly post from?
I primarily use MySpace. No, I'm just kidding. You can use LinkedIn. No, I'm just kidding. Greg Cammarata on LinkedIn. Yeah, all my contact info is there, and I've been posting pretty regularly on there as well, just about sales related things. So feel free to take a look, give a like, whatever your heart desires.
Whatever they desire. Wow, bold stuff from Greg Cammarata. Well, thanks for popping on, Greg. Really appreciate you kind of walking through your process. Anyone out there who I'm going to offer up your time, Greg, if anyone out there has questions or wants to talk more about how to effectively research accounts, I'm sure Greg would be happy to talk with you. I would be happy to talk with you. So feel free to reach out. Hope you enjoyed this episode. And until next time, good luck out there, everyone. Research is tough. You are doing this for your job. If you do this poorly, then you have a bad job. You've done a bad job and you get bad job credits. Yeah. And if you compile enough bad job credits, then you get fired.